Okay, here we go. We're rolling. We're rolling out. I hope that everyone can hear us well. How are you doing, sir? Great to have you back here again.
Hey, Script. Good to be back.
Yes. Share with us just a little fun, little stuff about you since the last time you're here. We had a great conversation with our last script, which was a little while ago. I think it was episode 33, if memory serves. So it's been a spell, but I'm so happy to have you back here. Right before we get to another holiday season, and with one heck of an interesting script to discuss. So how have you been so far?
I've been doing good. A lot of stuff going on, hurricanes, weathering the storm, but I think happily all that has passed us now, and everything was okay for the most part. So I'm excited to be back, though. Nice to read another script and discuss with you. I always love getting your thoughts on these, so it should be a good show.
And I love getting your thoughts of these as well. And so we've got confirmation that we're 5 by 5. So without sparing any more time, welcome to Scripts on Saturdays, the only screenplay review show on the interwebs discussing scripts both professional and amateur, circulating around Hollywood, giving you, the TV and movie going audience, a behind the scenes and inside track on what writers are pushing and what producers are buying. I am your host, the Script Doctor, and joining me this week again is Raul Anui. If I keep screwing up that name, I apologize greatly, sir.
No,
Um,
you got it.
Back again to share with us for those listening after the fact, his YouTube channel, which he has some really great insights and videos on there. Go check them out on filmmaking. You've got one heck of a cool Apple iPhone Color Pro video that did amazingly well over there. So I strongly recommend you check that out. That's got some good responses as well. So happy to have you back, sir. We're reviewing this week, which scored 14th place on the 2023 blacklist, called "Hit Me, Baby," and it did so with 17 votes, only a handful of votes higher than a bunch of the scripts that placed between the 30s and 40s. This one written by Kurt McLeod of the Clan McLeod, and the log line goes as such. A world class hit woman finds herself having to protect her ex boyfriend when he organizes a contract on himself in order to win her back. Raul, please share with us the synopsis of this screenplay.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting the amount of votes that it ended up with. So I guess we'll see if that's indicative of what the script is anyway by the time we get to the end.
Absolutely.
The uh the synopsis though says after Lex, a world-class hit woman, breaks up with her boyfriend Martin, he puts out a massive contract on his own life to get her attention. What Martin doesn't realize is that it's an open contract with a 48-hour expiration. So now every assassin in the Western Hemisphere is coming after him. Lex or Liv, depending on what the writer wants to go with, makes a deal to keep him safe until the contract expires. And if he pays her out the full bounty, with the clock ticking, the two must elude some of the world's most prolific killers.
So, um, interesting fact, and you're right to point this out. So, the synopsis was actually pitched by the writer as a log line. And for those who have been listening to the show for a while, Raul is very familiar with it. Also, you don't have a log line that long. That's your synopsis, essentially. In addition, uh, make sure that there's some consistency with your synopsis or log line to your screenplay, because you are right to point out in the log line, it's originally it says Liv is the female, but in the actual script, it's Lex. And it's not a 48-hour expiration. It's actually, I think, 12 hours, if I'm not mistaken, um, in the
Yeah,
script.
I think you're right. I think you're right about that.
so so we have a little incongruity here. Um, but I'd like to get your thoughts now that we've kind of covered like some concerning aspects of how Kurt McLeod has pitched his script. I'd like to get some of your initial impressions of at least the first 15 pages or so of "Hit Me, Baby."
All right. I don't know. This one's going to be an interesting one to talk about because there's a lot here to unpack, and I'll say I like the premise. The It's interesting enough that the way that we're introduced to the characters, you get immediately right off the bat, it's I don't know if you want to call this a 1 year prior or whatever
Hmm.
type of introduction where you kind of get in right into their relationship, how it started. She's the I don't want to say stereotypical, but sort of hardened, uh, doesn't let anybody in, doesn't talk about her feelings. She's just there to essentially get with this guy, sort of a Tinder date, and she thinks it's going to be quick in and out, and stumbles upon Martin, our one of our main characters, who's kind of a clubby, super emotional, definitely not the alpha male she typically goes after.
Right.
So as far as the beginning of it, pretty interesting. At least it hooks you right away. She's kind of distracted on the date and doesn't. It kind of looks at him and sort of brushes him off at first, but something about his sincerity and openness, I guess, draws her in a little bit. At least piques her curiosity.
Yeah, because he's this type of guy who um, doesn't fit the archetype of a very masculine man, and this is a deliberate setup, and I think it's a pretty good setup because he's the type of guy who he's genuinely nice, and he doesn't feel bitter by the fact that his love life is not going great because he's genuinely nice. Like, he's not one of those types. He's just a guy who's like, "Hey, to the waiter, oh, I ordered a water like a half hour ago. Could I get? Oh, I see you're walking away. Okay, I'll wait for you to swing on back." Like, it's played for comedy deliberately that way. And the other part too is he's also not the resentful type. So what's kind of interesting, I thought, in the first few pages is that, okay, you get that this character is kind of annoying, but there's an endearingness to him, and he's wears his heart on his sleeve, and he's honest, and that's kind of what gets this woman Lex, who she shows up to this date like dressed to the nines, but she's also distracted and kind of a little grumpy because she's had a horrible day at work, and we don't know what her work is yet. And here we have Martin, who he's dressed in, like, he's got a nice shirt and he's got a nice tie, but it's not properly centered on his shirt. His pants and shirt are kind of rumpled as if he doesn't own an iron, which I can relate to because for some strange reason, irons always break on me to the point where I'm not allowed to iron things in my home anymore. My girlfriend's like, you can't do it. You've gone through 6 irons in 2 months. We're not. I don't know
What are
what
you
I'm
doing
doing
with these
wrong.
irons, man?
I have no idea what I'm doing wrong. I'm following the instructions, so I just think it's a curse on my part, or maybe it's a sinister plot, so I don't have to iron. I don't know. Nobody knows. But regardless of that fact, he's very complimentary of her, and he's also trying to dig deeper into her because she's looking at him superficially and like, ah, okay, well, I thought you were this other guy. This is Sean or Ben or what have you. And what's really interesting is that Martin remembers the accurate name that she first says when she's like, I thought I was on this date. It's like, oh, he's a listener. And he retains his stuff. And then what we get is this quick montage where you think it's going to be just a one night thing, but it's going on for a long time. Like, probably, it goes up to around Valentine's Day. We don't know what time of year this first date took place, but it goes up to Valentine's Day. And then we get a smash cut to current day because we're not set up to like that this was a year ago. We're introduced at the moment. He's alone at the diner, at the restaurant. He's rehearsing what he's going to say to this date. She shows up. Everything he planned to rehearse completely thrown out the window. But she's into him, and she's, every opportunity that they're together when they're on a regular date, she's just down to DTF, so to speak, and he's thrilled by it. And then he does this romantic gesture for her on Valentine's Day, and then we do a smash cut to outside of a nightclub 1 year later, and we find out that she's kind of left him, and she's doing her own thing. And then we find out exactly, well, what is her own thing, and we meet her friend. Oh, my nose just rose on me. Oh, here we go. We meet her friend Shelly,
Totally
who,
right, yeah.
and we learn pretty quickly that, um, Shelly and Lexi are kind of like La Femme Nikitas in this world, hired guns to get in and out for a hit. And I liked how they introduced Shelley because she's got like a beauty to her, but she's also got a little bit of like Martin characteristics where she's a little eager, a little needy, a little easily, but she's also jealous, which is not a Martin characteristic.
And you
And
can tell there's some competition between them. They're
yes,
constantly competing both for attention of guys, I guess, and also it turns out on the job too.
on the job as well. And we get this pretty interesting nightclub scene. Because one thing I will say, like when you open this script and you see lots of walls of text, you kind of get a little apprehensive, thinking, "Oh boy, this is going to be dense." But I will give Kurt McLeod a compliment here. His mastery of the language is quite strong because you're able to read through it very quickly, despite the fact that it's long. Um, like he picks the right words that go in the right order to make things kind of flow quickly and still create that image in your mind. When he describes this nightclub, like he kind of nails this. Like you get the complete layout of it. You figure out, okay, this is the bar. This is where this guy is. We're at a table, like, just off the dance floor. There's the Christian character who's introduced as this hunky, alpha Brad Pitt type, who's constantly staring at Lexi, but she's got her back to him, so she doesn't really see him. And of course, Shelley is all jealous that the guy that she likes, Christian, is not into her, and she'd be willing to do anything for him. And we find out that all these three people are actually on the same job, and that is to take out this character who's described as Playboy. And Playboy actually ends up kind of giving the eyes to Lexi, and in front of his trophy wife. And the trophy wife kind of acknowledges it, but also manages to follow Lexi into the ladies' room and essentially said, "Listen, I want to call off my contract." And Lexi's trying to explain to her how that's not how this works. Of course, the trophy wife is saying, "Well, I'm the client and you're supposed to make me happy, and my being happy is you not completing this job because my husband has convinced me that he's never going to fool around on me ever again." And Lexi and us as the audience already know at this point, well, her husband has just given her some flirtatious eye movement and gestures, so clearly he's lying to her. And Lexi then traps the trophy wife in the washroom and goes out to flirt with the Playboy husband. And Raul, I want you to, if you can remember or if you have the notes, I want you to do your best to kind of recount how does Lexi take this guy out in the script?
Oh,
Do you
so you
remember?
put me on the spot here.
No, that's okay.
I know she manages to. I think she plays up to him, right? And basically goes. He's in the back room somewhere.
Yeah, he's in like a
and
champagne room type of setting. Yeah.
yeah, and he. Is this? I know she makes a mess of it at the end anyway with the whole nightclub thing because they've got sort of bodyguards all around,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't remember. Does she force her way in? I think takes out the
No,
bodyguards and then goes to him, or no?
actually, you're thinking of the next beat of the scene, but you're in the right area. So she gets kind of invited into his little area, and they make flirt nice, and then she gets a little aggressive with her touching and feeling, and then cuts him underneath his neck with her nail. And we
Oh,
find
that's
out
right.
that the nail is actually like this acrylic that's disposable, but it's also got like some acid to it, and it's invaded his bloodstream, and it kind of kills him. And she takes off her stiletto shoes, and she's walking barefoot through the club, and everything is kind of okay until the security team reacts to the death of their client, and they try to lock off the building. And that's when we get into like a John Wick style, old boy style, like fight scene where spikes protrude from her stilettos, and she uses them to basically just stab her way out of this club. In addition to using like the velvet rope and the metal latches on each end to kind of like a bullwhip and like hurt her opponents from a distance. And it's a
So yeah,
little
she got a couple of people charging at her, and then you get the chaos in the nightclub, firing your gun in the air, so everybody starts running around,
running
kind of
around.
scene.
You've got Christian coming to her aid here and there, subtly without her fully knowing, but she kind of knows because she's good at her job. And if this was being played straight, you'd roll your eyes. But we already know because of the romantic meet cute scene at the beginning that this is a comedy. So you're able to suspend a little bit of disbelief. And even some of the stunts are kind of silly as well. Like she manages to form kind of a very rugged noose around one guy's neck with the velvet rope, and then leap off the balcony and use his body to kind of ease her descent down to the ground. And then just as she gets there, she meets up with Shelly, and they're about to get into their car, but Christian pulls up and says, "Hey, ladies, I'll give you a ride home." And Lex is like, "No, thanks. I'm out of the way." And Shelly's like, "Well, I'll join with you, Christian." And she's like, and Chris's like, "Do I know you?" And she's like, "Yeah, we work together. It's not
We've
ringing a
met
bell."
multiple
Like,
times.
yeah,
I think she said, right?
yeah. It's like I sat next to you in this mission thing. Your thigh, your knee brushed my thigh. And he's like lost. And she's so disappointed and dejected, and so and all the chaos. These two kids kind of they part their separate ways, and we figure out that, oh yeah, Lex has been kind of distracted for the last several months, almost a year. She hasn't quite a bit on her A game since.
And she's played very much in this part of the script, especially when they're making their getaway, that she's closed off sort
Mhm.
of emotionally again. She's very much, Christian makes his advances, and she basically brushes him off, and she's back to nothing but business, right?
Pretty much like everything is it's work focused, and she has a price point goal, which is actually kind of interesting because on last week's show we talked a little bit about that with regards to motivations. You need a goal. Why are you doing this? What's going on? And Lexi kind of she goes into this very elaborate jewelry store in whatever city they're located in. They haven't really been specific on that. And she visits with her boss named Fran, who's this 50 odds year old something assassin, former ex assassin, who's does a lot of her transactions in cash and on letterhead, essentially, like doesn't use computers, and is very big much a stickler to the code. We get a sense that there's kind of like a John Wick industry. There's like regulators and higher ups that everybody all coordinates with. We find out that her exploits at the club kind of racked up a number of dollars in damages, and that's coming out of her pay from the contract that she just made. And of course, Lex is like, well, it's no longer fun anymore when you end up having to pay for the damages you've done to achieve your goal. And of course, Fran's trying to reel her in and be like, this is the bureaucracy of the industry. And I thought there's an interesting dynamic going on here. I want to get your thoughts, Raul, of this part here from mentor to mentee, so to speak.
Yeah, it's interesting. She's there. You get a couple of glimpses in this scene. One is that the jewelry shop is sort of just a front,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. Like maybe she's into jewelry. She kind of likes the more expensive things in life, but she's clearly just using it as a front for this other business that she's running. And then, like you said, also the fact that there's this bureaucracy sort of you have people to answer to sort of thing. It's not just uh, her running these contracts or giving contracts out or whatever, essentially, and she's the top dog. So yeah, it was that part of it at least was interesting because it sort of gives it a little bit, although you don't really find out too much about it. It's sort of mentioned in passing, so if you're
Mm-hmm.
not paying attention, especially since this is sort of written as a comedy, I think it could easily brush right past you.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, despite the fact that the writer here, Kurt, is good at covering his action descriptions and getting some voices with his characters, he doesn't delve into all the details of the infrastructure that he's setting up. And this this is kind of, I would say this is more of the smarter tactic to take, especially if you're creating a world that you don't quite fully understand the details of. But You just want to cover the basics, and you're not trying to go outside of what those basics are. So he knows, or at least he knows in this world, there's a regulatory body that oversees, let's say, a number of these pocket hitman private companies that are all coordinated together. And he's like, that's my rule. That's my universe. This is how this is. And there's nothing more I'm going to talk outside of that. And that makes it very smart, because the moment he would try to stray into that and be a bit more detail oriented, again, calling back to last week's script where the guy's, he's hacking into computer systems and security systems, and he's using parallel companies like that mirror real life companies and how they do their things, and he's trying to convince you that he knows what he's talking about, but it was so easy to pick apart that this writer knew nothing about what he's talking about. Here, Kurt is like, this is the world and the rules that I have, and I'm sticking to this. Every agent has a private app that alerts when there's a contract out, and there's two types of contracts. There's a contract for a specific hit person to do, and then there's an open contract where anyone, the first person to get it, gets the contract. And it's like, oh, those are easy rules to follow. That makes sense. And we get a lot of subtleties here. For instance, when Lex goes to turn in her, collect her portion of the contract, she has to hold her wrist over a device, and it triggers, and it says, okay, authorized. And you find, oh, there's an implant in her arm that, allows her to complete these transactions. And we later find out that implant is also a tracking device. So it's how people can take a look to see, oh, if I'm on my app, my little private and silly contract killing app, and I see that there's a whole bunch of my fellow agents kind of coordinating in one spot, it's like, well, either I'm going to miss out on this contract, or I got to get my butt in gear if I want to beat them to that first. I don't know. You don't know where the target is because the target's not listed, other than they're just all going there because they figured out that is where their quarry is located at the point. So
Yeah, but you kind of know that the agents themselves, you can see the location at least. I
yeah.
will say that I do like that, as far as, because I think the same thing, especially when I'm watching a movie or a show or whatever. If they start to delve too deep into it, especially when it doesn't have any relation to the plot, it's just kind of exposition or world building just for the sake of it, without there being a sort of meaning behind it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it gets a little tedious, and it's like, okay, I think this is more than the audience needs to know. So I do like that. I do wish that there was just a little bit more on the back end bureaucracy regulators part, because it does later on sort of come back and play a part in the script. But from the dialogue initially, at least reading through this the first time, I didn't catch a lot of that, because it's sort of just mentioned in passing lines. But I almost feel like it would be more beneficial if there was a little bit more, hey, there's somebody breathing down my neck type of setup
Mm-hmm.
before we get into the rest of the story. That was my only thing. Not to get too detailed or whatever, but just give me a little bit more, because I felt like that part could easily just go right over your head. It's just sort of mentioned and then immediately blown off.
Yeah, so this is something that I've identified as like conversational exposition, where it's not exposition on the surface, but it's told to us in a way that's a shorthand through these two characters. So these two characters know what they're talking about. We as the audience have to take some guesses and infer from what's being said to understand what it is, but it doesn't feel like we're being sat down and Michael Caine is telling us the rules of the world. Like we just
Yeah.
don't get that point. And I think, I mean, it's a very difficult balance, because to your point, it actually has a high risk of going in one ear and out the other for the audience, because it doesn't feel like there's a gravity to it for them to pay attention to. But at the same time, you also don't want that gravity to be so strong that it completely stops the momentum of the story. So that's where I think your suggestion of, hey, if they brought in, say, one character that was the representative of the regulatory thing, and basically he or she was in Fran's office going through her physical books to double check that the numbers are right, and Fran is getting really irritated by that because of her legacy
Yeah,
in this industry. That
that's
hits
exactly what I was
harder.
thinking too. Yeah, something, like bring in the suits, you know what I'm saying? Like something like that are
Hmm.
like, oh, and then you see them maybe like not like ransacking her office, but at least going through it, and then she's like, look at what I have to deal with once they leave, you know what I mean? And her and Lex are having the conversation.
Yeah.
Because it sort of gives a little bit more gravitas to the So you realize that, like, okay, she's not the top dog. She's answering to people, and there's consequences to messing up a job, being too messy, all that kind of stuff.
And that can dovetail right into what Lex's recent job was, is, oh, she trashed this club. You had to trash the club while I'm being audited right now. That's the last thing I need. And
Right.
then both of them could look at the auditor and be like, oh, that's a guy that they've known for years. Like maybe his name's Dave or something. Oh, hey Dave, nice to see you back again. Bad circumstances. It's like, yes, ladies. Well, this is the part of the job no one ever talks about when it comes to private contract killing. Because it's a
Yeah,
comedy. Lean
exactly.
into it a little bit. Um,
Yeah, give it a little, make it a little funny. Have a couple jokes between, her and the suits or whatever, it gives it a little bit more of a kind of stakes, and I think they could play off each other because for actually this part of the jewelry store conversation part of the script is it's a little long
mhm,
between the conversation between them back and forth. The only thing I is clever that she said was the because I think you mentioned it before that Lex has a number, right, that she's trying to get to with all
mhm,
these contracts. And then Fran, who's her boss, essentially says, like, oh, I remember when I had a number too when I was younger, but you always reach that number and find out that there's bigger things out there that you always want more,
mhm.
and I thought that was a interesting part of the conversation, but the rest of it sort of didn't set up enough as much as I wanted anyway.
Yeah, there. I mean, it was all about. I think this scene was playing more for the bite, like the biting back and forth with these two characters. That, you know, they work together because Fran needs an experienced hit person that can do the job and do these types of jobs. And going back to the first kill we see her do, it's not a strangling around the neck or like a Famke Jensen in Goldeneye type of kill. It's more just oh, I've got this special tool in my fingernail, poison in and out, and then oh crap, the bodyguards are after me, so now I gotta be physical. But but you could definitely understand that, oh, if the bodyguards didn't respond so quickly, she would have gotten out there unscathed, and that would have been a very convincing uh, type of hit for a woman of her size and stature and her confidence. It's like, oh, you understand. She didn't have to fight through a whole bunch of, security guards or police to get to her target. She used her seductivity, she used flirtation, and she used poison to take out the guy. And that I think is pretty good because you're kind of playing into a little bit of, okay, well, this is the rule that I have. This is why female assassins would be valuable because they're getting into areas in a different way that allows them to be less suspicious compared to, an Arnold Schwarzenegger type or a Stallone type walking in there just to say, I'm taking you out, bud. And Kevin Costner having to stand in the way and be like, no, not today, man.
Yeah,
um,
I'll say this since we're talking about it now, because this is one of the things that I had written down in my notes, and I did want to talk about it.
Great.
Is she definitely it gets pretty close to, if not on the nose of that, like, girl boss energy type
Mm-hmm.
of thing. She's written very much. I agree with you. The seductive part, the using her looks and everything else that she knows is an asset to her to get close to people. I think that's clever, and I think playing on that would have been good. It, it is a comedy, so I do understand he tried to sneak sort of like the physical comedy, the guy getting the thing around his neck, and sort of her using that, him slamming into the balcony and
Mm-hmm.
her, rappelling down or whatever. It starts to border on that a little bit, sort of unbelievable. She's like kicking the ass of, like, 50 guys while she's alone or whatever sort of thing. And it's like, I don't know, you're teetering on that edge.
Definitely in that
Um,
first set piece, it was very much crossing the edge. I
yeah.
mean, the only thing that kind of saved it is she was never she was picking them off one by one through distance, through guns, through using the velvet rope as a whip to keep them
She was,
back.
yeah, sort of using her environment, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and not at like a Jackie Chan level, but kind of just at like a more Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman level. Just stay
Right.
back, and and then it wasn't so much she's challenging them to basically have a Kill Bill moment at the end. It was more like stay back so I can get away to my car, and
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, that's a fair balance, but you get really close at some points because I mean, fortunately, throughout this whole entire script, I don't think there is a moment where she genuinely knocks a guy out and they're out for the count. Because there's a couple of times where she hits a guy and he goes down, but he gets back up fairly quickly, especially
Yeah.
the other assassins that get involved, which I'm skipping a little bit ahead to, but we'll get to that in a moment. So we find out from Fran that okay, you've got your number, what have you, but I'm only giving you the X amount because number one, we're taking some money out to pay for the damages at the club, and number two, I'm also taking some money out because there's a piece of jewelry in the store that you have to wear and you've got to leave. And unfortunately, that never comes back into the script as far as I know. So that was kind of a superfluous scene. I didn't quite get that. But
Yeah, and speaking of the superfluous stuff, this is the second part to what I was going to
oh,
talk about
great.
too, and I don't know how you
Yes.
feel about this, but the every relationship that gets introduced, especially with Lex, never hits for me really in this script because it's surface level.
Hmm.
Like you were talking about the conversation between them, they know what they're talking about, and he's giving you kind of just like this back and forth between them. You can tell that maybe they have a prior relationship or they've been working together for years and they sort of have this quippy way of talking, but it doesn't give me enough. Just like the opening scene with Martin, I felt like didn't really give me enough, and this will come to play later on in the script for me, at least anyway.
Hmm.
It just, I don't feel like I'm getting enough to get invested in these relationships. I find myself the whole way through this script thinking, why do I care? Because the dialogue and Lex herself seems so surface level as far as I don't know, character, I guess, character development, giving me a little bit of background with these characters. Even the relationship with Martin back in the, I think it was page 2 of the script, gave you what, 7 or 8 different scenes from their relationship that were basically 2 or 3 liners on the script. So,
Hmm.
you're thinking in a movie, it's going to flash by pretty quick.
Yes.
Um, and that's basically the whole setup to the relationship. So when it comes back later, I found myself sort of being like, I don't know why I care. I'm reading this and I'm just like, I don't know. I'm not that invested because I never really spent that long with these characters to begin with. It was all very
It was it
in
was
very fast,
it was a fast paced part. So you're describing
yeah.
something that I pointed out years ago with a Jason Segel, Cameron Diaz movie called Sex Tape, because they actually have like a meet cute and then a montage of all their romps, and then we come to where they are in the present day. They're married and they're kind of like losing. They feel like they've kind of lost a little bit of their spark. This script actually, I think, is missing a scene because we go to that Valentine's Day picnic that Martin planned for her as the end of the montage, and then we do an immediate smash cut to a year later where they're not together anymore. And I think there's we lose a beat of empathy, right? Because
Hmm.
we build up to it on the first date where she's like, okay, I'll give you a try. And then all of a sudden this montage is like they are going to all these places, all these things that some that Martin likes, some that Lex likes. But at the end of every single part of the montage, Lex is just putting the moves on Martin and he's just rolling with it. And then he does this romantic gesture and she's taken aback by it, but we don't see an aftermath of that. We just cut away. And I think what would probably have worked out better is you have that one montage where he's getting all ready to do some sort of grand gesture, and he goes to pick her up at her place, and the person that opens the door is just another woman, and you find out, oh, she's moved out. She's left town. She's gone.
Yes.
And now he's heartbroken. Now we have empathy because we're like, oh, dude, what happened? Like we were
Yeah.
in the throes of this, honeymoon stage of a new relationship. And then we cut to where Lexi is, and now we're like, okay, we feel empathy for Martin, and now we have curiosity for Lexi. Why did she move and not tell him? And how is she able to do it
And
so
because
quickly?
there's so many there's not, I don't want to say so many, but there's quite a few sort of action set pieces in this script. I feel like maybe we could have cut the nightclub short a little bit,
Hmm.
showing that she's good at her job and that she's sort of back to her old self where she's business and nothing else. But then, like you said, given me a little bit more, extended that relationship part of the script at the beginning a little bit to where you're sitting with these characters for a minute so that you build that empathy for them and sort of see, like, maybe she's closed off and, like you said, she's all about the physical in most situations, but then the heartfelt thing comes in with him and throws her back, and sort of they build this thing, and then like you said, she just cuts out or something, like something happens where you see it and you're like, oh man, now I empathize with these people.
Right.
I see Martin's predicament or whatever.
Oh yeah, because again, like when you're dealing with a romantic comedy, and you really want to try and do your best to hit the emotions there, because that's what you're doing for your audience. You're doing the jokes necessary. You're doing the jokes really for the boyfriend, and you're doing the emotional stuff for the girlfriend when you're going to
Yeah.
these romantic comedies. Um, and and this the writer skipped the opportunity to make you go, oh, I want to know. I want to know what happened. Like, we'll take a look at something more recently that did really big numbers, but I thought was actually a very weak romantic comedy. That's Anyone But You. So that opening meet cute, pretty strong, and you see the start of what looks like it's a good relationship to be blossoming, and then Sydney Sweeney's character just gets up and leaves for, well, the guy's asleep for no apparent reason, and she's talking, I guess, to her sister on the phone, like, oh, I had this amazing date, amazing day, I like this guy, and she's just like, well, are you with him now? It's like, no, I'm heading to work. It's like, what? Did you say goodbye? Oh no, he was still asleep. Like, why would you do that? He's just gonna think he's gonna be upset, and so she rushes back. And by the time she rushes back, that thing is revealed to be true. He is upset. And he's trying to hide his feelings because he's talking now to his best friend, who is like, well, what happened to that lady that you blew me off to go spend up with? Like, oh yeah, she came, she stayed, she left. I'll probably never see her again. It's just a one night thing. And then she overhears that, so now she's got resentment. You're like, oh, there's your dynamic. There's your empathy. Both of them are upset by a mistake that was made, and they both made mistakes. And you're like, oh, will they ever realize that they. And then that's what's driving the plot forward. We don't get any semblance of that here. And this is kind of a running thing with romantic comedies, is that you have a dramatic irony in there. We know what actually has happened, and one of the two characters or both the characters aren't aware of that, and we're all hoping that evidence will be exposed to them as the story progresses, where they realize that it's just a misunderstanding, and then they get their happily ever after. This part here, I think, was just too abrupt. I think it's like, oh, it's a year later, because I'm reading that nightclub scene as, okay, so she's going to a nightclub, she's doing a job. Is she, like, she must still be with Martin at this point? And then we find out after the fact that she's been single for a year, or she's been distracted because she's been single for a year. And after she leaves Fran's office and goes back home, and she hooks up with some guy named Chad, and but she doesn't call him Chad. She actually screams out Martin's name, and Chad's like, "What?" And she's like, "Oh, sorry. Who are you again?" "Chad." "No, it's okay." And he's like, "It's okay. You can call me whatever you want. I'm down to play." And she's just like, yeah, go into the bedroom and get ready. I'll be right there." So she does. She kind of gets another drink, and then her phone goes off, and she sees this contract, this open contract for 12 hours. And it's for $2 million, and that got her attention. She's like, "Ooh, that's my number. Like, that gets me to where I need to be." And she has this kind of like planning wall where she's got her dream car and her dream house and what she wants to do, all in this corner of her closet. And so she basically just goes back into the bedroom, throws a blindfold to Chad, and says, "Just put this on, stay here, and be ready for me when I get back. It won't be too long." And because the contract, she finds out, because this is one of the things that we learn, is when you're given a contract, it comes with the location of where the target might be, and so that's where you have to be. And for her, it's only 3 blocks from her house, from her apartment. So she's like, it's an opportunity she can't refuse. So she grabs her gear, gets into a nice dress, heads over to this hotel. The details of the contract are like, the target's going to be in this apartment, or sorry, this hotel room at this time. It's $2 million on completion. And so she's beelining it to there. And as she's going to to the location, she ends up bumping into Christian again, who's got this guitar case, and the two have a little chat, which the subtext is pretty much on the nose, where he's like, yeah, I'm going to I'm in a band, I'm playing an open mic, and it's all code for like, this is an open contract, I'm gonna take this target out. And she's like, I'm just doing some shopping and whatnot, and he's trying to flirt with her, and she is completely disinterested, which I think is funny because she's very much focused on this end goal of, I want that $2 million so that I can quit this job. And they part ways. She goes into the hotel. What's funny is that she knows the concierge personally. There, they exchange kisses on the cheek, and she heads up to the room where there's two bodyguards outside, and she sets up this cool thing where we realize, okay, this is her game. She comes in and she's like, hey, room service sent me up here for your guest to give him a good time. And the bodyguards are like, oh, okay, well, we'll just go check. And then before they finish the sentence, she's kicked one of them in the head and knocked him to the ground, and then knocked another one out by smashing his head into the wall. And they go down, but the door is already open. Like, there's no key to get in there, nothing done. It's unlocked and it's slightly ajar. She goes in and she sees her target, which is named Mr. M, and he's this kind of strapping guy from behind. And as she gets closer and closer and she draws her gun, Mr. M says, I knew it'd be you, and turns around and boom, it's Martin. and then you're like, okay, yeah, we kind of saw this coming. We figured it wasn't too much of a surprise, but the thing is, it's
there's
Martin.
A little setup in the script before where it basically like sort of like shows him but omits his face. It's kind of like, oh, he's well dressed, he's walking around with bodyguards, whatever, sort of entering the hotel, I think is the little glimpse that you get of him.
Yes.
And then you don't catch his face until he says, I'm expecting you, and turns around and it's Martin. But I mean, who else could it have been?
Who else could have been? But this Martin is a little different. He's got better hair. He's not in frumpy clothes anymore. He's kind of like posh. And it kind of takes Lex aback. And then, funnily enough, the two guards kind of get up. One's bleeding from the nose, the other bleeding from the ear. He's like, hey, what the heck? We were about to let you in anyways. And you find out that they're not actual real security guards. I mean, they are, but not bodyguards. They work security at like a department store or something, and they've never even held a gun before or anything of that nature. They're
like parking lot security, basically, or whatever.
And then Lex gets like really upset, and then we find out that this has been Martin's plan. Like we learn, and unfortunately this comes through dialogue exposition than the showing that I would have preferred, but we learn that Lex just up and left, and Martin was, figured, okay, he wasn't masculine enough for her, so he decided to change himself. And we learn, oh, he's an engineer. He's also into software. So he analyzed himself. He figured out his weaknesses, and he decided to work on them. So he got a personal trainer. He got a martial arts
coach, and
a life coach, martial arts instructor. He got someone to teach him how to dress better, and she's just kind of like blown away because she's like, well, wait a minute, like, how did you afford all this? He says, well, I sold a patent on a programming thing, so I'm living pretty comfortably. She's like, wait, since we haven't seen each other, but since, like, well, no, before we did that, I didn't want you to think I was rich. She's like, but you are rich. I mean, he's like, I live comfortably. She's like, but you had to
find out. He's like, you live with your parents, or I think she said at one point, and he's like, well, it's implied that like he had the money before, I guess, but he still decided to live with his parents anyway.
Yeah, and he says, well, there's a reason for that, and it's not what you think. And she's just kind of like realizing, wait a minute, I was, sleeping with this guy that could afford a $2 million hit on himself, because you have to pony that money up. You can't just, do it on IOUs or anything. It's got to go into an escrow. And she's kind of like, wait a minute. And she's also constantly denying the fact that they were boyfriend and girlfriend, because Martin thought they were, because they've been dating, or like from his perspective, they've been going out and then sleeping together for a long time until she vanished. And you also find out that the reason he knows that she's a hit woman and all this stuff is because she's let it slip at some point, which means that they've had actual conversations before. And I thought it's kind of funny because it's kind of telegraphing that Lex, while they were together, was exposed, being a little vulnerable to him. but I would have preferred to have actually seen that earlier in other areas.
Yeah,
That
that she was starting to sort of open up a little bit, right? Is the implication. But yeah, it would have been much better to see it instead of find out through dialogue between the two of them.
exactly, and then we get the twist, which is, well, we've got a problem here because you filed an open contract and other people are going to come after you. And Martin's like, well, no, it's not a problem. I just cancel it right now. And this goes into what was set up earlier where you can't cancel these contracts. So he's trying to cancel it on his phone and it's not going through. And that's where Lex tells him, like, what's going on. Like, you put out a contract, it's got a 12-hour limit before it lapses. If no one kills you in that 12 hours, the contract is then considered void and you get your money back and everybody walks away. And he's just like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's not too much of an issue, until she says, yeah, but there's like 50 other assassins on your tail right now because you foolishly made it an open contract instead of just asking for a specific agent. And she makes a deal with him. She says, this is what the deal is going to be. I keep you alive till the running out the contract, and in the end, you give me the full amount, the $2 million. And this is where we learn a little bit of the bureaucracy, where if she did commit the hit, she'd get the $2 million, but she'd have to split half of that with Fran as part of her fee. And so she's made a deal now with Martin. It's like, I'll keep you alive, but you have to give me the entire $2 million. And he's just like, oh, okay, sure. I just wanted to, like, have a nice evening with you. I've planned out this entire, like, amazing night. It's dinner here, a spa treatment there, all this great stuff. And Lex is kind of just blown away that he did this stuff, or that he could do this stuff, because up until this point, everything that they did were just kind of like average middle class dates, nothing high end, nothing crazy. And before she can even like make an answer, and this scene I actually appreciated because it fits into a big flaw that was in last week's script, which is, a red dot appears on Martin's head, and she immediately, with cat-like reflexes, knocks him to the ground, allowing him to be alive while a bullet goes through, instead of what last week's main character did, which just stare at the dot and watch his girlfriend or partner's head explode in front of him. So in this case here, like, she goes down, but she also takes a shot in the shoulder from the sniper as well. And so they're basically trying to figure out how to survive this thing. The sniper's, of course, Christian. He's across the street on the roof, taking pot shots. And we're into our another action set piece where it's not she's shooting back at him. It's more like she's got to somehow get the curtains to be drawn and then shut off the lights and all that type of stuff. And
basically trying to stay alive, because this is where you sort of get into this is the beginning, at least, of the cat and mouse game, where the open assignment starts playing into the story and everybody's after them, and she's trying to wiggle her way out basically to keep them alive.
Exactly, because she really wants that $2 million, but the writer's also really trying to he's really trying to establish that Lex is doing this for more than just the money, but I don't think he succeeds as much as he thinks he's succeeding, because he's not putting Lex in the situations that force her emotions to be challenged. He's distracting everybody with the set pieces. So this set piece here is, okay, the goal is draw the blinds so the sniper can't shoot anymore. Okay, when she achieves that, we then have a couple of guys with shotguns come in, and unfortunately they kill the security guards that Martin hired, which I thought was unfortunate because I actually kind of like those characters. For only having a couple of lines each, they were distinct enough to stand out a little bit.
But it's funny because they were sort of just two guys in unfortunate circumstances. They didn't know what they were getting themselves into. They probably thought, oh, this is going to be a quick paycheck.
Quick paycheck, a type of role play. Yeah. I mean, the other part too, which is actually kind of like, I saw the effort in comedy where Martin, the two bodyguards, they get up, they're injured, and they're like, we weren't expecting this. And Martin's like, you know what? I completely understand. I'm sorry, guys. How about this? Like, when you go to the hospitals, keep the receipts, send them to me. I'll make sure you're reimbursed, and anything out of pocket, I'll cover for you. And you're like, okay, he's this sweet, nice guy that's offering, compensation in addition to what he's already paying them, because Lex kind of took things a little bit too far in the setup here. But then unfortunately they get shotgunned to death, and then Lex has to use her own pistol and her own ways, which this one was kind of interesting. She uses, oh God, how does she get out of it? She gets out of this with like pop shots, and then I think it's a foot race to the stairwell and then into an elevator where she loses them, and then when they get into the lobby, they see more on the way, so they go back into the elevator and there's a lot of, we have the ticking clock and then we have the cat and mouse. So we got these two gimmicks complementing each other, but it's distracting us from the tension that Martin and Lex need to have, which is, does Lex, now that she's reunited with Martin, does she actually have feelings for him? And what is he able to do to kind of put her in a situation where she has to deal with that? That is being deliberately delayed, and I think that is where one of the bigger weaknesses, at least of the script at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. I had my problems with how the relationship started, or what at least was shown at the beginning of the script, but also when they get together. And I think I wrote something in my notes to the effect of it paints her as generic. It's just like a generic, badass chick that, she does her assassin work. She's completely shut off from the world, and there's nothing there to sort of pull you in. Very like emotionless, and I think you're right. It's part of that. There's no situations that she's put in where that sort of exposes that there's something else going on. Like you kind of want that, like, oh, she's feeling something too, but she's just trying to bury it down or something. Like there was something there, but she just doesn't want to admit it. And I don't think you really get that.
No, that would have to be something that your director and your actor put the work in to convey within the limits of this script. And
Yeah.
that is not something you should be putting on them to do independently. You should be giving them all the points they need to form how that relationship would work. And
Yeah, put them in different situations and let the situation sort of play out, right? As opposed to let's hope that some close-ups on her face or an actor reaction or something gets the point across that she's sort of conflicted, I guess, right?
right, because I mean, the closest you get, I thought, so there's this one point where she asks for Martin's jacket, and Martin takes it off, and he's like, oh, of course, you must be cold. And he tries to put it over her shoulders, and she kind of shrugs him off. She says, no, I've been shot in the shoulder. I wanted to hide the injury. It's like, okay, you've touched on something there. There's something you can play with on that. And how I would have played with it is the fact that if she's got a shoulder injury, she can't raise her arm too well to put the jacket on, so he helps her. And then that's where you get that tension to explore again. It's
Or
like,
maybe try to sort of mend, mend her, or do something to help her out. That kind of it also implies that he has other skills as well, since it comes to play a little bit later. So you're kind of setting that up, and then also that he still cares about her, and she sort of has no other option but to sort of accept this, although it's sort of begrudging because at this point she hasn't had her turn yet.
pretty much. And so they managed to get out of this hotel room, if I'm not mistaken. We find out that he bought this Lamborghini, this hot pink Lamborghini that she's always wanted. So we learned something interesting with Martin is that, he's seen her dream wall, so to speak. And in his effort to win her back, he is fulfilling a couple of parts of that and does so. So they get into the car and they speed off to this restaurant because I guess that's like they have to go into some place public. Like I was kind of lost at this point. It's like, why are they going to the restaurant right now? What's going on here? We find out that
I think it's like before they get to the car, right? They run out the hallway, go to the elevator, go down to the lobby, realize that there's people coming in that are after them. And then they sort of go back up and end up in this restaurant where, again, she's well connected. I think I think in this one, like Martin had already preset this up as a date.
Oh, right, that's right.
So
he preset it up. I'm getting confused because this is a hotel with a rotunda restaurant on the top. So,
right.
They go he has the reservations there, and the meal, the menu's already been ordered and prepared. So when they show up, the food is kind of ready. But she also knows that the head maitre d' there as well. She speaks with him in private for a quick second, then they go to the table, and then that's when the two Russian guys with the shotguns, they come in, they sit across from them, and then another group of assassins come in, and she just talks about how, the Russians, they're going to do horrible things to you before they kill you, and like, and then Martin's like, oh, that's terrible. What about those guys? She's like, you don't want to know what those guys are going to do. And you can tell that the context is supposed to set that up, that itself is a joke, but for me, it just doesn't land because that's way too performance heavy related. Like, you're never going to make that work unless someone knows how to really deliver that line.
Yeah, and this is the first or this is the first time you get to see that there's a lot of other people after them because they basically the reason they're trying to go into a public place was they're not it ties back to the conversation that she had with Fran that they're not going to make a mess essentially with all these people in public. Uh, so they're there to kind of avoid getting shot basically somewhere else.
Yeah, it's like Lexi. It's poorly implied that Lexi is hoping that everyone else who's doing the contract is going to respect Fran's rules of not, damaging public property
Be as clean as
and
possible.
be as
Yeah,
clean as
yeah, yeah.
possible. And she's betting that that's going to be the case. And we don't know if that actually is going to be the case because she's like, Martin has her favorite, I guess, dessert, beef dessert or something, and wine and the pairing, and he's like, "Here, have some, please. I know it's your favorite." And so she bites into it, and she's like, "Oh gosh, this is my favorite." and you get a little bit of vulnerability there, but again, the writer Kurt doesn't play it that extra beat it needs. Instead, as soon as she starts eating that, Christian comes in and sits down, and he starts trying to do a negotiation as well. It's like, hey, how about we split the bounty and when we take out this guy? And she's trying to flirt with him. And Martin actually shows a little bit of confidence for the first time because he's a little jealous of Christian until Lexi keeps on brushing him off. And then he's kind of falls back into his enamored with Lex kind of persona. And Lex keeps checking her watch and she's fiddling in her bag. Well, Christian is basically saying, like, listen, Martin, your time is up. I don't know what the deal is with you or why there's this contract out on you. But when it's all said and done, a lot of us are going to be richer, happier, and Lex and I are going to probably have a shot. And, of course, Lexa says, not interested, and she brings out these night vision goggles. And then all of a sudden the lights go out in the entire restaurant because she asked the maitre d' and I guess paid him off to hit the breaker box. And then all we get is the sounds and flashes of guns going off and crazy noises and whatnot. And then the shattering of windows. And all of a sudden, Martin, Lexi, and I think Christian fall into the pool underneath the restaurant. And then other assassins kind of come out. And there's a little bit of a fight in the pool. But Martin, I guess, hit his head. And he's still like in the water while everybody else is kind of breathing and smacking each other about and trying to shoot each other. So Lexi has to stave off the assassins and then swim underneath, grab Martin, and then get him up out of the water and hope he awakes. And I did like how it was described where when she finally got him out but then has to fight off one of the Russian guys, Martin's complexions goes from the normal, like, recent suntan to colder, bluer, whiter, losing oxygen, going to die. And I'm like, that's a good setup. We get to kind of see how fast it's happening. And again, this is like a mini ticking clock. So I have to give props to Kurt for setting up and understanding the dynamics of those things because they, from a filmmaker side of thing, from a pacing side of thing, for an audience side of thing, it gets you invested, especially considering the fact that now that we've had 2 or 3 more scenes with Martin and we see how dedicated he was to Lex, but not into like the creepy way. He's doing things to try and prove himself worthy of her based on what he knows because he's doesn't understand why she left. So he's figuring if I can win her over, maybe I can learn why she left. And maybe from there, he'll have closure. Because he's also not doing this with the sense of, oh, we're going to get back together and we're going to be a couple in the future. He's doing this to try and prove himself as one last shot so that he can get closure with either, yes, this will go forward, or yes, this is over. Which is a very, I think, funny trait that you give to an engineer because I know a few. I have friends that know many, and this is one of their things where it's just analysis, and then whatever the result is, as long as the result is ironclad, they accept it and they move on. And that's what Martin's doing here. He does.
Yeah, it sort of plays into his personality that he's just a genuinely nice guy. and I think he's just trying to figure out like, let's figure out just what happened.
Yeah, like he's seeking for an answer, and he's developed a system that he thinks will best get him that answer.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, his premise to activate this series of questions to get him that answer is also interfering with his ability to get that answer, which I thought was kind of funny. It's like, I need to get her attention. Well, I know she's a hit woman, so I'll put a contract on myself so I can get her attention and show her the things that I'm presenting here to make myself worthy, or at least, at the very least, understand why she left. Oh no, because it's a contract and it's open, everybody is interfering with my ability to find this answer. The one flaw in the execution of this is that at no point does Martin get frustrated that he's not learning what he wants to learn because of this error that he brought upon himself. Like, I like the fact that he brought this thing on himself of his own machinations, because that's funny. It's like, oh, I did this scheme to try and get attention of the girl I like, but it comes with all this extra baggage that has nothing to do with what I wanted or what she wanted. It's because I didn't think this through properly, that we're in here. He was thinking with the wrong head. The blood flow is going into the wrong organ, not the brain, but the genitals. So you understand that flaw, and you can appreciate it, but it's still like it's not. I don't think it's actually explored to its fullest potential yet, because you have to have that little bit of frustration. And Martin, even though he's very active in trying to figure out Lex, he doesn't quite respond to the obstacles in a way that I think could have been funny for what he was trying to do. So that is something that I think really needed to be further explored. And
Yeah, because he's it's like that fish out of water thing where obviously he's not. This definitely is not up his alley. It's not his personality. He had no idea sort of what he was getting into. Um, but I would imagine somebody that would get into a situation like this would be, one, way more terrified of what was going on, and then two, sort of stumbling their way through this. And even though he has that moment where he's in the pool and sort of drowning, Lex has to save him. Um, that's pretty much the only time that, besides that, he sort of goes back to just being his sort of, bumbling nice guy type of act, and not really, I don't know. You don't feel that like
you don't feel,
danger, because I think
yeah,
Lex is just taking care of everything immediately as it comes up.
yeah, like he's his active character goal is not on the physical side, it's on the emotional, and Lex's active character goal is on the physical and not the emotional. And when she finally does defeat the assassins in the pool, and she gives mouth to mouth to Martin, and he wakes up and he sees her as an angel that saved his life, and she, again, that's another missed opportunity where she could have had a beat or something there. But instead it just goes straight to, I didn't save your life, I saved myself $2 million. And I'm like, okay, good line, but you kind of need some more pressure to get that out of her. It can't be just so easy. It has to be, we should be building up the doubt of that point. Like, this should be the veneer that we as the audience see through, and that Martin is starting to see through. And we have to be asking ourselves, well, how long is it going to be before Lex realizes that it's really a veneer, that she doesn't actually believe in this?
Yeah, you
And
should start to see the cracks, and I think that the problem is you never start seeing those cracks develop. She's basically Stonewall the whole time until much later on in the script.
yeah, it's because right after we get out of the pool and they get away from Christian, they go back to her apartment. And this part I kind of saw coming, because it was set up, and I think it was set up fairly well. She goes into the apartment. She heads to her kitchen. She grabs some tin foil. She goes into the freezer. She grabs like her golden parachute kit. She wraps the tin foil around her arm, and that obfuscates her GPS tracking system in there, because they're right at this point now. She's figured out that all the other agents are realize that she's with the target. So if they follow her, they'll get to the target. And this is basically like your your Total Recall moment, right? Like you put your tinfoil over the thing, and now your ping on your app is just not able to localize your location. It's beeping so big that's broad across the entire screen, type of deal. And as she's talking to Martin, Chad, the guy that was she was about to get it on with before the call came through, he's in the bedroom waiting for Lex, and he has helped himself to the kitchen and the whipped cream and created some sort of weird phallic mountain shape over himself. And
Chad's the comic relief in this.
Yeah,
he comes back into play after being forgotten for a little bit.
he does. And they do play with him well for the parts of the scene because he's another fish out of water. And the other part too is he does have a similar trait to Martin in the sense that he's willing to roll with the punches, so to speak, as things are going on. But yeah, he takes off his blindfold. He sees Martin there, and he's like, "Oh, okay, so we're getting another party in here. I'm cool with that, but I got some ground rules." And before he even says what those are, the door, this key code on the door gets triggered, and Lex tells both of them to get underneath the bed and stay there until she comes back to get them. And she goes, finds out like who knows the password to her apartment, how are they getting in here. And so while they're under the bed, Chad's trying to chum it up with Martin, and Martin's like, I do not want to be a part of this. This is weird. You're naked, you've got whipped cream all over your body, and you do not know what I've just experienced, for the past hour, and what's going on. But we find out that Shelley has broken into Lex's apartment to basically collect on the contract. And these two have their fight, and that's where we get the whole, like, you're jealous, you keep sleeping with the guys I'm interested in. And she brings up a story about, like, how she slept with some guy that Shelley liked on her birthday at her birthday party or something. And
yeah, I think they got together, and was it their pool or something like that?
Pool or hot tub. I can't remember too much other than the fact that, like, the context was that she slept with a guy Shelley liked at Shelley's birthday party.
And I will say, as opposed to some of the other relationships in the script, I feel like this is the only one that was telegraphed appropriately and then sort of built up, because there was the scene at the beginning when they were in the nightclub doing the first contract that she was on, when you find out what Lex does for a living, where the same thing, guys were giving Lex the attention, they were sort of looking after her, giving her the eyes and everything, and Shelley was clearly there trying to get the attention of these same people, and says like she wanted to get with Christian, and then there's the part where she goes out to the car and Christian blows her off again. So I felt this part where Shelley comes back was appropriate.
Yeah, it was earned.
I got the relationship between them,
and it worked too. And then I mean, this is the other part too, which is also a little bit like, I see why he's doing it because it keeps the movie going, but it's a little bit of a flaw in the structure because we barely got a breather between set pieces, where we now get into another set piece where these two girls are kind of having a cat fight and throwing each other around, and then a gun is drawn and it keeps getting knocked out, and they're all fighting over the gun, and that's when Chad and Martin decide to get out from underneath the bed and try and help Lexi, and doesn't quite go over so well. But what Lex was able to do is trap Shelley in a bedroom with a security door, which I thought was pretty elaborate because I would expect those things to be pretty expensive, especially to install in your penthouse apartment or what have you. And it's bulletproof on top of that, because when Shelley starts shooting at it, indents go in, and one apparently ricochets off and nearly hits her. But that pretty much puts us into this new situation where Martin, Lex, and Chad basically realize, okay, so we have to leave, and Chad unfortunately is like, well, we can't go yet because all my clothes are in your bedroom, and so he's still stuck being naked. And I'm like, this is okay, that's a good gag. It's like we now have Martin, who's the instigator of this situation, the guy that is fawning over Lex, whose entire goal is to try and keep Martin alive. She doesn't really care about Chad, except for the fact that she just doesn't want an extra body on her hands to deal with. So she has to kind of keep him alive a little bit too as well. And so since they can't get out the main front door because security has alerted that all these agents are kind of coming to her apartment, They escape through the garbage chute, and of course, Lexi's the first to go in and out. So we got the little Star Wars thing. She pops out. Martin falls in, and then Chad, naked and covered in whipped cream, falls on top of Martin, and then you have that little comic thing there for them to explore, which you can visualize in your head that if it's done right, it could be really funny. Like, because he doesn't put much effort into the actual choreography of that joke. But this is definitely ripe with potential for a director and a couple of comedic actors to really have some fun with, being in a garbage bin covered in whipped cream, trying to get out there. Both of them kind of not really wanting to touch each other, but are stuck doing so because it's a confined space. And this is where this is where I think you're correct, where I screwed up, where this is where the hot pink Lamborghini kind of comes into play. And Chad is thinking, oh, great, cool ride. I want to be in the shotgun. and of course, Martin and Lex kind of hop into the car and drive off without him. And he's just there. And he's kind of left naked, using like a milk carton to hide himself. And then a group of ladies in a car kind of slowly drive by, staring at him. And he's like, hey, ladies, where are we going tonight? And because they're oogling him a little. And that's the last we see of Chad. Essentially. And now we're into this next beat where it's Martin and Lex just trying to figure out, well, where are they going to go to next, right? So she's got the tinfoil on her arm. She knows that they can't really be traced. And this is where they have the conversation where I think it's brought up over the phone that Lex learns that she's got now a $500,000 contract out on her, because she's not completing the contract on Martin. Because this is like the speakerphone scene, right? So Martin's there, he's listening in, and this is where we get more exposition.
Fran calls basically to say, essentially, like, what are you doing? You know what? This is not you, and you're kind of messing this up and everything. And I think she had the bounty on her before, and I think they sort of upped the stakes in this one, basically being like, it's up to $1 million now. So essentially, I think it's implied that the longer she sits out there, basically gaming the system or the rules or whatever, the stakes sort of increase for her as well.
Yeah, the financial incentive gets so big that everybody, not just the people in that state, but maybe everybody throughout the world will start coming to hunt her down. And all because she's not completing the contract and letting this Martin guy live. And what's funny is that Fran has no idea who Martin is or what his relationship is with Lexi. She still just knows him as Mr. M. And of course, Fran is giving her the opportunity. It's like, you bring him in now. We punch him out together, and we call this whole thing off. And Lex, again, this is that moment where it's not earned, because Lex says no to the deal, but we haven't gotten to the point where we see enough cracks in her shell to realize why she's saying no. Like,
yeah, because that's what I was wondering too. She says no, but I'm like, she hasn't given me enough to think that she would give up the money just for this guy, Yeah,
I think that this part of this scene is coming in too early, because they drive to that expensive spa, that private spa, like the Red Card Spa or something, because they're going to use some of its facilities to allow Lexi to remove the tracking device in her forearm. There's the cold water, there's the hot tub, and then there's the mud bath, and then there's the saltwater bathtub, and all these things that they do to kind of rejuvenate the body and whatnot. And they're taking advantage of that. And so, and this is a part where we get something a lot closer with regards to their relationship. So they get into the spa. They get into this room with the 4 tubs, cold water, the pool of cold water, hot tub, all that stuff. And Martin disrobes, and we find out that Martin's actually been working out for the last year, and he's got this kind of ripped body it's not huge, but it's well defined and cut for his shape. And this kind of piques Lexi's interest. But at the same time, she's like, you don't need to, why are you put the robe back on. Stop it. And it's kind of played that Martin kind of achieved that goal and is maybe going to be distracting Lexi, but I don't think it hits hard enough, because like
Yeah.
she's just in her basic underwear. She's got some tattoos on her, and she's trying to get her pulse down so that she's not pumping blood so fast, so that when she does the incision and takes out the tracking device, she's not going to be, bleeding out so quickly. So she's like, I'm the one that has to get into the cold water. You just be there to count my pulse and get everything ready for what I have to do next. And this is where we get to the scene where they're talking a little bit. He's saying like, yeah, I learned a lot about nursing and stuff, and also dialysis, because it was really important to me that I knew how to do this stuff for some other things. And this kind of makes Lexi realize, okay, there's more to Martin than just being this self-employed programmer who sold a patent on software and made a couple $1,000,000 and et cetera, et cetera. And so when she gets ready to do this, she makes a couple of jokes. She says, first of all, I mean, it's in there deep and it's close to an artery. Second of all, if I remove it, it might blow up. and Martin's like, what do you mean it might blow up? She's like, well, I don't know. They told me that, but it could have just been a ruse to make sure that we don't actually try to remove it from ourselves. They don't know, but apparently it's like it's deep in the forearm and it's close to an artery nearby, done so specifically. And we also get this little speech about another scar that she's got on her collarbone that she could have got removed but didn't because some guy shot her, and if it was just like an inch lower, it would have got her right into the heart. And he's trying to play that up like maybe that's why you're so cold and resistant, because someone did get close enough to hurt your heart. And it just felt flat to me because it just didn't feel like we had their relationship established properly yet for that part. But we get some. I like the description. I like the fact that when her pulse is down and she's ready to do the operation, she's doing it herself, and the writer basically describes, her hands are shaking erratically while she's holding the scalpel. Is it because of nerves or is it because of the cold? Like, you have that kind of question thrown out there, and I'm like, that's not bad. That's a good question to have, because she's doing something kind of dangerous, and you shouldn't be operating on yourself in any circumstances. And Martin offers to help because he claims that he has some information on this, but she of course says no. I'm thinking of all these like other type of movies that have used certain gimmicks like this. Like there was that movie with Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdams, like Game Night, where they had to like take a bullet out of his arm and do an incision in that part there. So I'm thinking like this is kind of playing in a similar sense, but it's less for comedy because this part is a bit more dramatic. And what ends up happening is that like she slices into her arm and she gets these like scissor clamps to go in and try and pull out the microchip. But I think she accidentally snips an artery, and she's like, oh no. And then just goes pale white and then falls into the water as blood is kind of leaking out. And before Martin can go in to save her, two more hitmen come in and try to take him out. And this is where we find out like, yeah, he's learned some martial arts and basic self-defense stuff. And so he's not doing a great job fighting them off. But we do get this one gag, which I think is probably the funniest part of the script. And that is he manages to throw this one dude over his shoulder and onto the ground. And he heads towards the pool to go rescue Lex. And as the second guy comes in with a knife, the other guy who he's knocked down does like this cool backflip onto his feet, just as the other dude throws a knife at Martin, and he ends up backflipping to put his head right into the path of the blade so that his buddy has accidentally killed him with a throwing knife to the back of the head. And both Martin and the guy with the throwing blade are in absolute shock because this is not what was intended to happen. It's like, oh, we'll do this cool stunt to show how badass he is, and then it figures out, oh no, he just put himself right in the path of this throwing knife. And Martin's like, dude, that was all you. I had nothing to do with that. and it's like, okay, it's a good beat, very honest to the scene. And with the other guy, he charges over at Martin to try and take him out, but he slips on the blood on Lexi's blood that was bleeding out from her arm, and Martin manages to throw him into the mud bath. He dives in, saves Lexi, digs inside, gets the tracker out, and then he throws it into the mud bath and buries it as low as possible while he's also pushing down the guy who's trying to escape. and then he throws himself on Lexi's body, and then it turns out, yep, the chip is an explosive, and it blows up, and it kills the guy, and mud and brains and guts go everywhere. And then Martin manages to patch up Lexi's injury. She's very dazed. She's kind of slipping in and out of consciousness, and he's like the bodyguard in this one. He picks her up in her arms, and he's just carrying her out while he's wearing his underwear and nothing else. And there's covered in mud and blood and guts. And he's taking her right to the car. And right as they get approach to the car blows up, and that wakes up Lexi for a moment. And she's just like, "Oh, that sucks." And then Martin makes a joke. I shouldn't have paid. I should have gotten on a lease instead of a full sale, because then you would have been paying monthly instead of the full price.
Yeah, when the Lamborghini blows up,
yeah.
At least he could have maybe gotten the rest of the money back or something.
Exactly. So now they have no transportation. What he ends up doing is like he throws her onto her back and makes a break for it, and we get these like in and out of consciousness beats where he's hopped a fence somehow with her over her back, and he's swimming in a lake. And I don't know how far out he's swimming, but all I'm saying to myself is like, man, this guy's got some endurance, because they end up going to like a lake house. And when Lexi wakes up, she finds herself listening to two men, geriatric men, watching The Notebook. And at the same, not only are they complimenting how gorgeous Ryan Gosling is, but also how, like, if they were in the situation of Rachel McAdams, there wouldn't be this back and forth, will they, won't they? It'd be like, no, I'm taking him to my room. And then, of course, the other guy is like, you wouldn't last a minute. And, they're just kind of ribbing each other, playful insults. And she's hooked up to an IV and a blood bag, and she's feeling great, and she has no idea what's going on until she realizes that these two old guys are Martin's dads. And it's played very straight, which is ironic considering that they're a homosexual couple. But like, there's no identity politics on it. There's no like preaching or anything. It's just these two old guys that love each other, that like making fun of each other, and are very proud of their son, because one of his dads is actually got kidney dialysis. So he has to be monitored regularly, and he has to have a dialysis machine. And we find out that's why Martin is still living with his parents, is because he's the guy that's taking care of that technology, and his dad, who's going through that thing. And here's another part where we get a little bit of show, but a lot more of tell. And that is when one of Martin's dads says that he was dating this theoretical physicist major for 7 years, and she was a knockout, gorgeous woman. And the reason they're no longer together is because when his dad got sick with the kidney dialysis, she didn't respond to it in a very mature or respectful way, and Martin dumped her. And this is where we get this endearing aspect where Lexi kind of realizes that, yeah, Martin is really more about the character of the person and not so much about the physical experience, physical appearance, or the doubts that they have, because Martin is trying to get Lexi to say, yeah, I don't like killing people. I hate my job, but I'm good at it, so I'm going to keep doing it. And I'm not a good person. But he's trying to say, I think you are a good person. You're just kind of pigeonholed into this job that doesn't fit with your personality. Yeah. And that's what this whole kind of scene was about. And I think if this scene happened, and then you got the call for her and Fran, where that deal is proposed to her, and she says no, that would have felt a bit more earned, because now we're getting a bit more details. We're seeing Lex finally forced into a situation where she's learning about Martin in a way that she hadn't before, that it would have been funny, and this would have been a better payoff, if during the montage we actually got a little bit of dialogue where every single time Martin is like, I want you to meet my folks, and she's just like, well, I've got work this day, or I have to fly out of town for work, like just constantly avoiding it to try and keep it at arm's length. And also by distracting him with, instead of like, oh yeah, we're going to go meet my folks in an hour, she's like, I got a better idea. And then she just jumps his bones type of thing. Like, everything that she could to prevent getting that level of intimacy beyond sexual would have been a better playoff, because now you forced her into this uncomfortable situation where she is trying to be polite and gracious to someone who has just saved her life, and now it's getting her in a far more vulnerable state. And you have these two gay dads who are just bickering at each other, but are also complimenting the fact that, and acknowledging the fact that this woman, this Lexi woman, is drop dead gorgeous and a little rough around the edges, but definitely has a sparkle to her that they understand why their son likes her and wants to be with her.
Yeah, and I agree because I feel like the earlier scene with Fran was it's Fran, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a little premature, like you said. I because at that point she hasn't had any sort of emotional, like no emotional breakthroughs essentially. And
Mm-hmm.
here, when she kind of softens up a little bit for a minute, mainly because the writer gets away from these action set pieces, they keep distracting the emotional stuff from happening in the script before. We finally get a beat where they're kind of calm for a little bit. Nobody's directly on their tail. They're kind of in this hideaway, right? So they
Mm-hmm.
have a moment to sort of let the emotions play. And that's when you get this her kind of softening up a little bit. So yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think the scenes could benefit if they were reverse order.
I
Um,
think so
and
too.
then yeah, and then the thing that you were saying too about again the which is a running theme through this script anyway is the tell don't show, because I think the one of the dads, I think, right, mentions it to her that, oh, Martin's all about character and he cares about the character of the girl. Like I think it's explicitly said by a character. It's not
Mm-hmm.
so much shown.
Right.
The only thing that throws Lex off was like, oh, this other girl that he was with is insanely attractive. So he, the life before that she didn't know about wasn't what she assumed based on his looks, essentially.
Yeah, like her first impression of him was completely wrong because she leaned into the stereotypes as opposed to who is his actual personality. And
Yeah.
that's if anything, that's the only message that's going on in the script, is like look beyond the surface to see who the character of the individual is. You also have the cliche part of, okay, here's a picture of Martin when he's in high school where he has to wear this headgear for his braces and stuff all the time, which I'm like, dang, that sucks, because I also didn't know that they still were doing that in like the 90s and early 2000s, because I know friends with braces, and they never had to wear the headgear during the day. It was always like when they're asleep or something. So
Yeah.
I'm like, why would they? What type of orthodontist is forcing this kid to wear it 24/7? That's a cruel man or a cruel woman right then and there. But I thought it was kind of funny how the dads were like, yeah, we knew that he was never going to get laid in high school with that thing on. So when it did come off, we were very happy.
Yeah, and it's sort of it endears you a little bit to him again for the same thing. He's sort of this just regardless of what happened to him before, he's still this nice guy. He's
Mhm.
still all about it for the personality, and he tries to look beyond just looks and stuff like that. So
And I
it's
like
just a little
yeah, I like the fact that it's a consistent trait of his.
yeah.
Now the thing that kind of made me scratch my head is Lexi's playing into the conversation with Martin's dads and Martin himself in this moment, as if it's like a role. And this is the first time we see her playing a role like this before. Like she's never played this role before, or any type of thing. Like the closest we get is to the whole, the concierge sent me up to give your client a good time in this hotel room before she meets Martin. Like that's the closest we ever got to her playing into a role. And this one here, she's kind of playing into a, yeah, I'm his girlfriend role, where she's been in denial of that entire time. And we find out while she's doing dishes and the dads have gone to sleep that the only reason she's doing that is she didn't want to alert and cause concern to Martin's parents about what actually is going on right now, and also thought it'd be good to give them a win in the event of a bad outcome later on. And I would have really liked this if as we mentioned a number of times up until this point, if we saw more cracks in her armor to make us believe that this was always kind of a thing beneath the surface anyways.
Yeah, every single time there's an opportunity that comes up like this, it's like he just skirts the edge of what you would want to see or what would be good for the characters,
Mhm.
and then we go off in like a completely different direction. And like we talked about before, basically leaving it to the actor and the director to sort of like deliver that line as if she was trying to hide something or like in a like there's something more underneath the surface type of way. But as far as the script, the words on the page are concerned, you definitely don't get that.
Yeah, you could see like you kind of when you're writing a romantic comedy or a character or a piece that requires a lot of character subtlety and interaction, you have to make it what's called director proof. So this is where
Yeah.
you lay out primarily in the actions and make sure that they complement the dialogue the exact intentions of what each character is trying to achieve. So ideally here, Lexi has a personal motivation and she's got a veneer of a motivation. The personal motivation should be she's reunited with her ex boyfriend who got so close, so deep to her heart that she was terrified of what would happen next and ran away. But that part is so buried beneath the whole I want $2 million so I can quit this job that any time we get a scene that is supposed to bring that deeper motivation out, it's too far buried for it to reach the surface. And
Yep.
and I think that's what hurts her character, even though like she's got a very strong voice. Like you could when you're skim if you were to skim through this script and not really pay attention to the names of which character is speaking, you still know, oh, this is Lexi saying this line, this is Shelley saying this line, this is Martin saying this line, this is Christian saying this line. You are not confused because each character has a different type of dialogue and a different way of delivering and forming their sentences, which I
Yeah.
think is why this script scored so high. Is like the characters are very distinct enough, but Lexi herself, I think, is too buried, or I either because maybe the writer got a note saying the stuff that she's doing was too on the surface and he revised it, or he's too afraid to bring it closer because he doesn't want to accidentally lean into what she needs so easily to the point where we as an audience are wondering like it's so obvious, why doesn't she just admit it? Like he's got to find that
Right.
balance between this is this is one fork in the road that I want, this is another fork in the road and I want, and these two have to come in conflict with each other, and it has to be convincing enough to the point where the audience realizes the difficulty in the choice Lexi has to make. But I think because I think in his first attempt he probably wasn't able to do that balancing act right. So everybody was just leading into she clearly doesn't want the $2 million. She wants to be with Martin. Why doesn't she just admit that? And so his response, and this is all hypothetical, of course. His response is to bury that other part down deeper so that it's mostly about the money and less about him. But it comes at the expense of the fact that now we just don't feel some of the behavior she's doing is earned to the outcome that the writer is hoping to achieve between Martin and Lex. So
Yeah, no,
it's
unfortunately we
tough.
buried that part so deep down that it's now we just don't see it at all almost. Like there's a couple of times it comes through a little bit, mainly here, and at this point we're past the halfway point on the script.
Yeah,
So
we're
that's a very late point in the script for a sort of emotional down moment to come for a character at this point.
yeah, because this should be your turning mid act turning point, and it comes pace wise a little later in the script, um, and I think because that whole car scene with Fran that could have come after this because you have this other point which is Christian manages to track down Martin because Martin booked the room with his credit card, and they got his name, they got the details and stuff, and they decided, well, if we can't find, if we lost him all in these areas in the city, then he might go out to this address here, and so that's what he's done. He's scoped it. Lex has managed to find and get the jump on Christian, tie him up to a chair, and then we have this interesting interrogation scene where Lex is interrogating Christian in front of the dads and Martin, and one of the dads is really drill him hard, like really torture him, get the answers out, and the other dad's like, stop it, that's a don't do that, don't encourage him. No, don't encourage, and you don't encourage her. And we find out from Lexi, okay, yeah, there's three other guys waiting outside to jump in and take out everybody. And what Lexi decides to do is she hands Martin a gun, confirming that he knows how to use that, which he says, yes, I took lessons, since we've been broken up. And she's like, great, I'm going to go outside and I'm going to take care of these guys. And we'll be okay and for now. And this is the point where Christian basically gives the details to Martin and says, yeah, listen, even if nobody kills you after the 12 hours is up, her contract doesn't have a time frame, which means that the price is going to keep going up and up and up, and more people are going to be wanting to take her out with every passing day. But you could fix that if you so wanted. And this is where I think, oh, okay, this is where you can bring in the Fran stuff, because then, what ends up happening is Martin asks Christian, what do I do to save her? Because Martin is that type of guy. And Christian, we don't know what Christian says, but what we do see is that Martin has hopped into a car and drove out of the driveway, leaving Lexi after she has just dispatched these other two assassins behind. And she's kind of freaking out. And then we get a cut to a phone call where it's basically Fran has got Martin in her office, tied to a chair and gagged. And Fran is basically saying, listen, you come in here, you complete the contract, and your contract's gone. And we call bygones be bygones. Let bygones be bygones, all that type of stuff. And this is pretty much where you have to kind of cut off on the spoiler part, because this gets us into our climax. Like, what is Lexi going to do? Is she going to go in and kill Martin? Is she going to try and save him? Does she know it's a trap? Like, all those things, like, it doesn't take much imagination to figure out how it's going to go. But we want to keep the specifics, spoiler free, because I will give the writer credit. He does have some fun with this last set piece here. And he also makes fun of a very cliche ending of a romantic comedy and its setting and location, which I appreciated. But I don't think I can appreciate it as much because of what we said earlier. Lexi's motivation, the romantic part of the motivation, is too deeply buried for it to hit you where you need it to be hit. So,
yeah.
So with that being said, Raul, what would you rate this script? Is this a green light or a pass?
I don't know if I've had any yet, but this is going to be a pass for me.
Yeah, mine too. This is a reluctant pass because I really like the premise. I like the comedic gag. I appreciate the few parts of the script that are genuinely funny, but it's not enough, I would say, to live up to the premise of the romantic comedy that's implied with this log line, with the pitch of the script.
Yeah, I think I'm the same way. The moments I thought weren't earned 100% because of mainly on Lex's end. I don't think that was, like you said, either whether because it was of rewriting or whatever the reason may have been. I just don't think that it hit as much as it should have. For the concept of the film, it seemed too generic, I guess. There was some promise there. I like the fact that it was weaving in these comedic aspects of it. But I can think of other movies that sort of did this concept better and had a little bit more of an interesting twist to it. So yeah, for all of that, I think there's some glimmers of hope in this one. I like some of it, and I thought it was funny. I chuckled a couple of times throughout the script. The comedy, as far as the comedy part of it, it's done fairly well. I just think that the character motivations and where it's supposed to really have that impact, it just doesn't quite do it for me.
And I think so because the scenes that are around those moments that are there to set it up are afraid, I think, to commit to that. And yeah. I will say, on the comedy side of things, on the plot side of things, on the pacing side of things, this does have a lot of parallels to that box office hit of Anyone But You, which I think is a heavily flawed, really poor romantic comedy, but it does enough right that it made the money it made, and it had the cast that brought people back to the theaters to see it again and again. Even though you and I both agree that this script is not in the best of shape, if it were to be made and released, it probably would run in the same area. It would have a little bit of a of an obstacle to overcome with regard to Lex's kind of badass moments, but if they could play that in to be more comedic than trying to be serious, like for
Right.
instance that Chris Evans movie where he's going after his girlfriend who's a spy, and it's played by what's her name, the Latin girl who's in all those movies,
Is
2049.
it Anna Darmus?
Yeah, Anna de Armas or whatever. It just, that part just didn't work because it was, the comedy was about their dynamic, and they completely obfuscated the fact that you could also have comedy in the fact that she's this 92-pound spy, super spy. She shouldn't be beating up the guys in a fisticuff stuff. She should be Jackie Channing it, essentially, like using a ladder or a scaffold or something to knock something of greater weight or strength to knock out the enemy, or using poison and, garrote wire and, maybe some Black Widow and Iron Man 2 stuff, pepper spray, tasers, any type of device that can help her balance or offset the playing field so that she has the advantage. They didn't do that in any way in that movie. In this script, they play around with it in the first act, but in the second and third, they don't do any of that, which I think would kind of win audiences over in that regard. She's not using brute force to get out of those situations. She's using guile and technology and other means in order to make up for the fact that, yes, she is not only outnumbered, but she's also physically weaker than a lot of the men that are going to be in between her and Martin in that third act. And
Yeah, and I think that comedy part of it would be the saving grace of it.
yeah,
And almost like I don't know, like Get Smart type of, a lot of the things would be kind of played for comedy instead of, oh, this is a taking itself very seriously type of action.
oh God, like if you took this script and went back in time to 1976 and you made this movie star Gene Wilder and Madeline Kahn, and you had Gene Wilder pump up the script a little bit, this would be an instant classic. Because you
Yeah.
need a Gene Wilder type to play Martin, who's the nice guy, who's got this soft-spoken voice, but he's also this endearing guy. And then you have Madeline Kahn, who is a comedic genius, and she could have played into that, being the hard-edged assassin that also is on, really stressed out by the fact that she's got to protect her ex-boyfriend for $2 million. And you could tell that they would play the timing very, very well with this. So sadly, I can't think of any actors in this generation that could equate or stand shoulder to shoulder with those two. But that's what you would need in order to make this movie actually really, really sell well.
Yeah, and speaking of which, there was a part in the script that I forgot to mention, but it was that part of the conversation, just bringing it back to an earlier era,
Go for it.
where she was talking on the cell phone, and then it says she like very, I don't know, like it very emphatically presses like the hang up button, and I'm thinking like, like a smartphone, like a piece of glass, and she's just like, and I'm like, that would be so much more effective if it was like a flip phone or like slamming a car phone or something. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the same thing you're talking about, like just in a different era, I feel like this would hit differently. And even that gag, I was like, somebody smashing like a cell phone button nowadays just doesn't have that same effect, I guess.
It really doesn't, because no matter how hard you try and hit your finger onto that, it just doesn't look. It doesn't have the same
give
impact.
that gravitas to the situation,
Yeah, I mean the way that if you were to ask me, okay, you've got a character with a cell phone, they want to hang up and they want to show they're upset, I'd be like, I wouldn't even have them hang up. I'd just have them throw the cell phone out the window. Just like completely chuck it. It's like, I'm so pissed off, I threw it away.
I read that in the script and I was just like, I don't know. That looks cringy on screen, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, it does. I mean, like, because my brain thinking of it comedically is like, not only do they like throw the cell phone out of the window, but the cell phone is not theirs; it's the other guy's. It's like, that was my phone. I had a plan. Like, I don't have insurance. Like, can we go back and get it? No, they're tracking it through GPS, and I'm upset. Because you just don't get that level of comedy explored as often as you want in these scripts. But I will say, I have to commend, I do have to commend Kurt McLeod. Like, he has a good concept, he has good characters, But this, when you're doing a rom-com, the set pieces of the action side of it are not as important as the emotional pull back and forth that you need in order for this to win over an audience. And I
Yeah,
think,
that's what was missing. And even from a, I don't know, I feel like even from like a financing perspective, for sort of the scope of what this movie would be,
mhm.
there's so many action set pieces. I feel like that would, I don't know if it would be hard to get this movie made, but I feel like there's just so much action and just lacking in the character department a little bit, as much as I would have liked,
Yeah, because
and maybe an obstacle anyway.
there's like one, two, I think there's like 5 or 6 set pieces here. And
Yeah.
this movie really only needs three big
Hmm.
ones, and with each one, of course, being bigger than the previous one. But you, because you've got the opening set piece at the club. You've then got the set piece at the hotel, followed by the set piece at the diner, then in the pool.
Yeah.
Then you've got the next set piece at the spa, and then the final set piece. So you got a lot. Yeah, there's a lot you could cut out there set piece wise, and just make them a lot more shorter, more quippier in
Yeah, and have
between.
them when you have them have like an impact, because you've waited a little bit, and then you've had those. It would, from a pacing perspective, I think it would allow the script to breathe a little bit more, and
Hmm.
you could work in some of those character moments without uh kind of sometimes the script gives the sort of feeling that, like, okay, we're about to have a character moment, and then you're on to the next thing because someone's chasing them, or here's another set piece, or something like that.
See, I'm just coming up with this gag on the fly, but I think it would be kind of a funny running gag if that every assassin that they managed to defeat or kill, they had to throw into the back of their car and take it to the dump, to the point where the guy that's operating the city dump at night is wondering why this couple is coming in 2-3 times a night to drop off something, and why they're dropping it off.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, we just killed these 2 guys. We don't want to leave the bodies around for the cops to find out and investigate. So help me get them into the car, and we'll go dispose of them this way. And where do they go? Well, they go to the city dump because Lexi knows the guy there, but the guy doesn't
Yeah.
know why she comes there at this hour. She claims to have like a cleaning service or what have you, and it's like, yeah, I just have to, drop off some things. How much for the wait, And then she pays them and then drives off. And then an hour later, she's back again. Like, yeah, we got another client. And it's just a funny running gag. Is like, oh, now we have this tension. Will the guy figure out what it is they're actually doing? Especially considering the fact that they're now frequently returning to this one place to dispose of bodies.
Yeah.
And it, like, you need something of that nature, and also something that gets them, because I liked when they were working together to get the tracking device out of the arm, because that was a moment that they could play with. I think you needed more of those in order to break that shell and get them together, where it leans it closer into, this is why Lexi, when she first met Martin, entertained the idea of being with him, and now we're seeing why she was sticking with him so long. And now we see why she ran away, because he managed to get deeper than anyone had ever before. And she had to make a choice. Was she going to stick with her job to get her goal of the 2 million and her dream life? Or was this new life and potential future with Martin more satisfying, but also more vulnerable? And
Right.
you have to balance those scales. That's the type of choice you have with these types of films. It's like the When Harry Met Sally pair, or if you want to bring something a little bit more similar, the Sleepless in Seattle, You Got Mail type of thing. You have this risk, because wearing your heart on your sleeve or getting into a committed a relationship, especially a deep one, has a lot of weight to it, because it's no guarantee of success, and you have to work on it to be successful. But sometimes the chemistry is not enough to maintain that, and sometimes it's way too much to the point where it's overwhelming, and you're like terrified that it's too good to be true, and you don't know what to do next. Those fears have to be played off of when you're dealing with a romantic comedy, and I don't think that was utilized or even entertained as an idea for the script. And if had it been entertained, I think we would have probably enjoyed it a lot more.
Yeah. I think so.
All right. Well, Raul, as always, this has been an amazing conversation. Please share with all our wonderful listeners where they can find you on the socials, if you so want them to do that. I know some guests don't, but I do know that you have a very good YouTube channel and with some very helpful advice. So I highly recommend checking that out. Anything
Yeah,
else?
it's all my socials. I mean, X, Instagram, although I haven't posted on there in a while, but YouTube as well. We're all at Raul and you, and I'm sure it'll be linked. But yeah, go check it out. All filmmaking stuff. I have new stuff that I'm planning to put out because I actually just got a new camera, so it'll be a lot of director, cinematography type stuff, camera reviews, just because I'm interested in all that stuff. So that'll be coming out soon. Check it out.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank everyone out there for listening to us. Another thanks, of course, to Raul for swinging by again to talk of this wonderful script. I want to wish every single one of you out there listening a wonderful weekend. If you enjoyed this show and want to show your support, please feel free to sign up to the Patreon. The first week at the base tier is free, and it gets you all the backlog of articles, posts, reviews, and parts of the show that of upcoming episodes for you to take a look at and participate when we're doing this live. That's over at patreon.com/thescriptdoctor. And if you want to read the script but are having trouble finding it, just hit me up on the Twitter X's there at ScriptDoctorPhD, and I'll be happy to facilitate your ability to read the script. As always, please don't try to share it around or make it go viral. Because this is a screenwriter's piece of work, and we are really, even though we may have not given it a green light, double green light, we really do hope that this writer is able to tighten up the script, fix its flaws, and get it out there, because I still think this type of movie, concept-wise, does have potential to really entertain audiences and got to get us back on track on low-budget or mid-budget comedies. So we can hope that can be achieved at some point. As always, thank you so much for joining us this week. Until next week, remember, guys, when it comes to great story, it all starts with the script.